So, Dave, you've written two pieces that have been I appreciated greatly because let me back up a little bit here. At the beginning of this year, I had to sit down with my daughter and explain to her. Maybe I guess it was about a year ago, and maybe it was actually during even the Super Bowl last year. I had to sit down with my daughter and explain to her why we were putting tape over the Patriots insignias on our hats and our shirts, and why I said we can still enjoy our team, but we can't. I'm not gonna root for them publicly because of the Bill Belichick supporting Donald Trump, because it appeared that Tom Brady was also supportive of Donald Trump. And I should say that, I want to open this up to you, but from my perspective, I was thinking these things aren't political, but they are political in some way. Like this is a platform for me to express how upset I am about the political situation. But let's talk in general terms about that before we talk about the two teams playing the Super Bowl.
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, it's very understandable why you did what you did, not only because the actions of Belichick in terms of sending a match note to Trump right before the elections and Tom Brady's caginess about supporting Trump, the connection between Patriots owner Bob Kraft and Donald Trump. I mean, it's enough. And the way, frankly, that Donald Trump kept holding up the New England Patriots as a totem of, winners like me and I'm a winner and that's why the Patriots like me. It's very understandable why not only you would take that protest, but also I think it provides an opportunity to, in your case, speak to your daughter. In my case, it was to speak to the people who read my stuff about, politics, sports, and the way that politics can have an effect on sports, and sports can in turn have an effect on politics. So that. And because sometimes we do look at sports as if it's in this hermetically sealed chamber away from the politics of our culture. And I think in the Trump era, of course, that's much less of an argument, as we've seen politics enter every part of our culture. I was thinking about the State of the Union address and thinking that Tom Brady was a guest of George W. Bush during one of his State of the Union addresses, and how incredibly incendiary that would be if that happened today. And my goodness, when it happened with Bush, I mean, it was barely noticed.
Now, I mean, let's talk. I mean, just broadly speaking about teams representing, not necessarily embodying a political ideology, but the idea of. I mean, I think part of the reason why my reaction was to the Patriots that way was I think someone at the time, maybe it was a listener to one of my shows, had said to me, and maybe it was you, I can't remember, frankly, that during, there was a time in Spain where people would, I think, support the Barcelona soccer team.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, okay. I remember talking to you about that.
So, yeah, I mean, well, tell that story. And so,
Sure.
I took that to heart, and I decided, it doesn't matter where the individuals on these teams are. It matters just how people perceive them and where these totems are in our political landscape.
In exceptional times, that certainly does matter. And when you're talking about Spain and its history from the mid-1930s to the late 1970s of being under the fascist leadership of General Franco, different teams did take on different ideologies. So if you're rooting for Barcelona, you're also making a statement about your position against fascism. And if you're rooting for Real Madrid, you were taking a different position. And some argue that persists to this day in terms of right and left in Spain. And certainly with soccer, I think you see this much more clearly. I mean, there are teams in Italy that are openly allied fascist teams. And you're rooting for this team if you're a fascist, and if you're a fascist, you root for this team. And it's the way it works. And then other teams that have different ideologies. Now, some of that has been, particularly in the UK, for example, there was a tradition of that as well. That's been flattened somewhat by globalization, corporatization of these teams, and the turning of these teams into brands. Now, in the United States, we've never had it that sharply. There have been exceptional moments, like Jackie Robinson playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers, where if you're rooting for the Brooklyn Dodgers, you're also rooting for the success of integration and against white supremacy, like these very exceptional moments. But other than that, when you look at the last century and a half of organized sports in this country, particularly in the era of free agency, I mean, we really are rooting, to use Jerry Seinfeld's much-used phrase, we're rooting for laundry, and there really is no such thing as good ownership. There's contradictory ownership. There's no such thing as a team that's made up of good people. Teams are made up of all kinds of people. And there's never been a team that's tried to stockpile players of a particular ideology for the purposes of people identifying with the ideology instead of the play. And while I think that the election season last year was exceptional because of Belichick's letter, Bob Kraft's support, the things I've been trying to write about this week is for people to not go too far in painting the New England Patriots with political colors, as if to say rooting for the Patriots is somehow rooting for Team Trump, because it is much more complicated than that when looking at the Patriots, when looking at the politics of New England, not one state in New England voting for Donald Trump, and when also particularly looking at the relationship between this team and Trump, which is more complicated and contradictory than I think sometimes we see.
All right. Well, I want to talk about the specifics of both teams in a bit, but just staying on that general level. I mean, clearly, except for those exceptions that you outlined, and which not terribly surprising in the context of this country, tend to be about race. Yeah. When we talk about the politicization, and we're still seeing obviously that with Kaepernick and what's going on with the NFL to a large extent, but I guess and in some ways that's also a reflection of just the United States culture, right? Like where politics are so compartmentalized, it seems, or have been in the past, that like, oh, you leave that aside. That's not somehow not integrated in your life in the same way. I mean, this idea that, it became political just because, putting aside the reality of the team, the reality of the players, even what they have done or not done or who they represent or don't represent, it's just they're a totem. And I mean, I guess that was my perspective at the time, was just like, it doesn't matter, like they're a totem, and it just so happens, darn it, they're Donald Trump's totem. And so they can't be mine because I want people to know that Donald Trump is not my totem.
Right. And not dissimilar to that, I have to say, I was a campus activist after 9/11, and this idea of like when you would table of things about like saying like don't turn tragedy into war, don't go into Afghanistan. Gosh, I think not even us thought we'd still be there 17 years later.
Right.
But I remember doing that, and when people would come up to our table to talk to us wearing Yankees hats, we learned that we needed to gird ourselves a little bit, that this wasn't going to be someone who wanted to speak in a friendly dialogue with us, but this was somebody who was coming at us, with their fists balled up. And the Yankees hat, because of Rudolph Giuliani and the symbolism of the Yankees, it became a symbol for something more than just the Yankees. I don't think it persisted for more than a couple of years, probably not until the war in Iraq became so horrifically unpopular, but that was there. And it became a totem. For the Patriots, I think they're a great case study in how complicated it is when teams do become these totems, because first and foremost, they're commodities before they're political totems. And that's, again, a reflection of the United States that differs from say, Europe. That, it's a commodity first, not a political party first, not an ideology first, but a commodity first. And being a commodity first in New England meant that when Donald Trump went after the NFL this past season, Bob Kraft, his best buddy who gave over $1 million, was one of the voices against him, because Trump was going after the commodity, and that's where Kraft's loyalties lied above all else. I think Tom Brady's loyalties lie above all else to his brand, to brand Tom Brady. And that's why you did not see Tom Brady assert political allegiance with Trump, because he knew that was a bad move.
Right.
And that's also why you didn't see Tom Brady at the White House.
Well, Dave, hold on. Before we get into this,
yes,
let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about those reasons. Your progressive case for the New England Patriots, and you did put in parens, seriously, because it is
hard to write.
It's going. Yeah, I can imagine, but it's going to make my rooting a lot more comfortable this week. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Dave Zirin. I'm Sam Seder, Ring of Fire Radio.